Hey, listeners, and welcome to the You Are Epic podcast. This is where we honour the people who've helped build not just our industry, but our communities. I'm Angela Hucker, and I am so glad that you're here. So, I'm taking the time to sit down with people who've been in construction for years, people who've been through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. You're going to hear real stories of resilience, growth, and moments that shaped who they are. This podcast is for those that want to learn more from people who've been walking this path for some time, and they're helping to lift up others and quietly making a difference along the way. It's also to show you that your journey matters and your voice matters. And in case you've forgotten, you are epic. Let's get into it. Today's guest is Andy Barker, an award-winning safety professional who's not just talking about change, he is out there helping teams live it, breathe it, and embed it in real time. Andy is known around the world for the way he makes safety practical, human, and transformational. With over 50 international speaking engagements under his belt and a growing list of audience favourite votes, he's built a reputation for turning theory into something people can actually see and use on site or in the boardroom. Through his work with Orgtree, Andy doesn't just deliver systems. He helps organisations embed safety into the way they do work every single day. His clients don't just tick boxes. They win awards, they shift culture, and they lead with care. What I really admire about Andy is how real he is. He makes safety about people, not paperwork. And he brings a sharp, thoughtful, and humble approach to some of the most important conversations in our industry. So excited to have our next person on with us today, which is Andy, all the way from wee old Scotland. Andy, it's so awesome to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, I'm sure. Well, I think so. Anyway, I think it's a pleasure. Depends how difficult the questions
It is
are.
a pleasure. I'll be gentle and I'll be kind, I promise. So I'm just wondering, maybe to start with, if you'd like to share how long you've been involved in the industry, how did you get started, and what your role has actually been, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
Oh goodness, yeah, it's a journey when you're in your late 50s. You've been around a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started off as an electrical apprentice for the government because my
Okay.
mum told me that's what I should be. And my dad was an electrician, or an electrical engineer to be more precise. Four out of five uncles, I think, were all electricians.
Yeah, right.
And we either work for a government or down a mine. So it's like your path is clear. Do what you're told, right? And just follow in your footsteps.
Yes.
However, I wasn't very good at it. Quite literally, my brain isn't wired like that. I just didn't get it, right? I just didn't understand. My employer agreed very kindly and put me on a different career path. So they put me in quality, and I was very, very fortunate. I found something that I liked. I liked the structure, I liked the organizing, I liked the process, and so on. But it meant I got back to college to understand why.
Mm,
Why is it I'm doing these things? Because why is important.
yes.
And then that got me into the Ministry of Defence. It got me into explosive safety because, follow the process. Don't cut the wrong wire. I'll translate that to the language people understand.
Absolutely. Yes.
Which got me into health and safety. Now, I was told to go into health and safety. I didn't want to go in because it's the reputation smart after the fact and, checking and correcting and telling you you've done stuff wrong. And I couldn't
Yeah.
be like that. It went against the grain. I'm a people pleaser. I
Mm,
wanted to be helpful. I wanted somebody to think that what I did was useful. So I started switching safety services from what have you done wrong to how can we do things right together. It just seemed to gel. And ultimately, I've worked all over Europe. I've worked in Africa. I've lived and worked in Africa. I've lived and worked in the Middle East. I've traveled to the Far East, US companies, all bits in between. We'll throw a dart at a list of industries. I've worked in a ton of industries as well. And that means, back to the technical bit, I'm technically incompetent because when you're in an infrastructure business that builds bridges or designs water courses or generates nuclear power or, builds transmission towers over mountains and stuff like that,
mm,
I can no longer be the guy that says, I know what you should do it my way.
yeah.
What I found was if relationships on projects were good, then business outcomes were good.
Mm,
And that included safety. And where we had bad safety issues, we actually had bad relationships on site as well.
interesting.
So I've found that and my desire to be helpful, if I got helpful relationships going in projects, leadership level down, listening to each other, understanding each other, adapting to each other's needs, what you ended up with better business performance. So my claims to fame are turning around businesses with bad safety performance, fix the relationships, you get more profit, you get more productivity, and safety improves as an indirect byproduct of running a good business.
Would you call that coming from a human-centric aspect?
I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, instead of sitting down with a board and saying, I'm going to operationalize the following safety procedures, I say, I'm going to operationalize your core values. And you end up talking about trust and respect and dignity and what that means in this business practice, whether it's finance, HR, procurement. How do you operationalize trust? Right? It makes you think differently. Instead of filling in a form, how do we exchange knowledge? How do we exchange info? How do we make better decisions? How does one group interact with another group so that we don't just get a form filled in with some data, but we actually understand how we're working together? Collaboration, connection to deliver shared purpose. So yeah, very much humanistic. Purpose is important as well. Purpose and meaning and all those kind of things sit behind so much of who we are and what we do.
Absolutely. And I think that's vital for being a human, isn't it? Like you've got to have a purpose. So.
No, absolutely. And I've got a very good friend who's got a brother with all sorts of issues, drug and alcohol abuse and things like that. What he and I have spoken about is how can we give that individual some purpose? Why do you get up in the morning? What do you feel your contribution is to your job, to society? I think nature programmed us to contribute in a way that we feel good about that, but also in the way that the other people round about us see us contributing, if that makes sense. So that, I'm grateful for what I'm able to contribute. And I see gratitude in other people when I contribute me, right?
Yeah.
The apprentice electrician wasn't happy about his contribution, talking
Yes.
myself. I felt very uncomfortable. I didn't like it. And I was
Yes.
very fortunate that I had an employer that said, yeah, you are a bit crap at that. So we're completely aligned. Let's
Yeah.
find something you're good at, right? And I'm also fortunate that they could see what I might be good at before I even recognized it, even though I didn't like the idea at the time. But, they put me on a path. And I was like, oh, I like this subject and I like it, the way that I contribute, which meant that I worked harder and harder and harder and harder
Yeah.
and got better and better, therefore, at the thing that I actually liked to do.
So the purpose has kind of helped you sort of fulfill a bit of a mission as well, I believe.
I think so, but I go back to, what I wanted for me is what I want for everybody else, right? I want you to choose the career that you've chosen to be, plumber, electrician, roofer, financial advisor, HR consultant, HR manager, it doesn't matter. If that's what you've chosen to do, how in this organization is it okay for you to do that? That's the trust and the dignity and respect piece. It's not a piece of paper that HR pushes out and says, as a manager, be respectful in your conversations, right?
Yeah.
It's across the organization. How do we understand that I don't like finance, but I've got to let finance into the conversation,
Yeah.
right? I don't understand that technical thing, but you do. And if you come along and I say, how do we do that safely? And the finance person says, let's make sure we've got the right financial, buffers on this. And HR comes in and says skills and training and opportunity, then we all influence each other. It means everybody gets the chance to deliver the purpose that they chose for themselves in a way that's appreciated by the group, which means you open up, which means you can challenge more, which means it's psychological safety, really. And in that environment, you just make better decisions
Yeah.
and you feel good about it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I know you've got an awesome case study, let's say, about where you've kind of broken down those silos of, like finance and HR and executives and safety and all the different business units essentially within a company, that you've got a really good case study where you've been in and you've been able to like significantly shift the dial and turn it around and use that human centric approach. Would you like to share a little bit more about what that was?
Yeah, I think, I go back, I'm a safety guy, and I didn't want to get into safety because of the reputation of checking and correcting rather than connecting and collaborating, right? That mental image creates a barrier to engagement, right? I know you and I know what you do, even before I've shown up and had a conversation, right?
Mm.
So I went to the Middle East. There's a group of 30 companies, and we're logistics and cranes and construction and manufacturing and chemicals and tourism and all sorts of stuff, right? All sorts of stuff. Back to your human-centric approach and my inability technically to help you with your circumstances. I'm not going to go into the reputation in the Middle East for, how we treat workforce. By and large, the workforce are a commodity, right? We need 100 electricians, 25 welders, 35 joint, whatever. Literally just numbers. And they're difficult industries to work in. They're hazardous industries to work in. Employees get careless. Accidents are inevitable. If we have a fatal accident, we put a check in the coffin and we send them home. Right? There's no real legislation, right? In quite a lot of the Middle East countries, the police will show up if somebody dies, but they're interested if you threw them off a structure or somebody stabbed them rather than because it's an accident, right? It was an accident. It's construction. These people understand the risks when they work there.
Mm.
So you couple that narrative with the narrative of safety as a cost, it doesn't really add any value. And if I add up all the checks and the coffins that I send home, I don't even get to the HSE budget for salary. So even if you stopped all of these people dying, you're still not turning a profit. So two very powerful narratives. What I believe, back to the purpose and the meaning kind of thing. And I should say, a history of 5 to 15 fatal accidents per year, multiple suicides, those kind of things going on. Year on year, it just is like that. So the pain has gone away corporately. It's just the cost of doing business, right? So my belief is that everybody has all of the knowledge they need to make this go right. Put your own definition of whatever right is in there, right? If only we trusted each other and saw the value in each other enough to have that conversation. So I asked a very unqualified bunch of safety people, 80%, I think, of the department, 700, 800 people, between 60 and 80% had 0 to 3 years experience. 60, 70%, I can't remember the exact numbers, had an entry-level qualification. Wow. So our ability to understand our profession, the experience that we could bring to bear, pretty low.
Yeah.
People running manufacturing organizations, logistics, crane hire, construction, that's where the money is. So you've got, 20, 30, 40-year experienced people. You can't have an argument when you're just out of school with somebody like that. So what can we do? So I asked the safety guys, the problems that we face. Find somebody that fixed the problem that we face and say, thank you very much. You get a hole opening, people fall through holes. You get an investigation and a just culture, and who do we fire and whose fault is it? Who didn't follow the procedure? So nobody tells you about the uncovered holes because bad things are going to follow. Now, when somebody covered up a hole, we took their photograph and said, thank you very much. Let me tell you how your behavior fits with the core values of this company. And then we shared the story at a managerial level and from a board level. So you now got the owner of the company sending emails out to company owners, the CEO saying, I want to share an example of somebody that's going to help with our future, right? So more of this behavior means better results in the long term. So every time somebody solved the problem, which were all problems that we had, we said, thank you very much for fixing the problem. Thank you very much for fixing the problem. Now, when we showed up to talk about the problems that we had, it became okay to talk about them because they get recognition for fixing it as opposed to harm for it existing. And the problems that we got to solve got bigger and bigger. So you can only start out with small things because big change is hard. Little micro changes led to bigger things, led to thank you for procurement for buying this equipment. Thank you to finance for giving us the budget to buy the tools that these guys needed to actually do the job, and the client's happy. And we start to join up all of the narratives with the purpose that we're here for, which is to deliver this to our customers. So finance gets to do their job. HR gets to do their job. Engineering gets to procurement. Safety get to facilitate more than do, but facilitate the job. And it's all very much around your contribution is appreciated and valued. Thank you very much. 2 years later, no fatal accidents, no suicides. 3 years after I left, companies picking up international awards. So
Wow.
it sticks.
And it also affected their bottom line as well, I understand.
First conversation I had on day one with the CFO was, there's no way you're ever going to make a profit. I felt very uncomfortable, and the guy was deliberately making me feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't exist. And if I had a chance to hire, I wouldn't have. When I resigned, the conversation was with the CFO, first person that called me CFO. And I'm back up a little bit. I've got my stories out of sync a little bit. So the CFO called me because he'd seen the cost of new equipment. He'd seen travel costs because I was flying expensive people in to start up meetings for projects in a foreign country, right? And everybody was like, yay, road trip, right? But there's a cost to that.
Yeah.
And he'd seen investment going in and decided to run the numbers to prove that Andy's inappropriate influence is costing us money. And he ran the numbers and called me to say, you know, I was going to send this to the CEO and let him know you need to get fired because you're costing too much money. But we ran the numbers on one project. It was a small project, $6.8 million US. And he said, when we ran the numbers, it turns out that we made $2.8 million more profit on that smaller project. And by the way, they wrote off all the investment on that one project, which means that the equipment that we had, the skills, the training, you know, the additional costs were just straight into the bottom line on the next project and the next project and the next project. And all it was like engineer something for the client, but we couldn't build it. So we needed to get specialist equipment in for this. We had a specification for access that we couldn't get our equipment. So we got the client to change the specification so we could get our equipment in. As soon as you can get the right construction equipment in to build your construction thing, and it's built for construction, instead of 90 days, it took 30. And that just builds onto the next project, the next project, the next project, right? We didn't break it every time we tried to build it because we were trying to shoehorn something that didn't work.
Yeah.
That's an engineering conversation. It's an HR conversation. It's a procurement conversation.
Yeah.
It just so happened that safety facilitated the outcome. And the issues that were engineering, procurement, and HR related were causing fatal accidents in the business. But there were also productivity, there were also profitability. And so I'm rambling now. I hope that makes sense.
No.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
But to have, you know, what's that, almost a 30% profit on a project that's only small, purely because people were engaged, they aligned with the purpose and the mission, and they're appreciated and they're valued, and they're kind of really, they're empowered as well, aren't they?
No, absolutely. And I go back to at all levels of the business, right? Particular example I'm talking about, we built transmission towers over mountains. And the client wrote a specification that said, once this is built, we need to be able to drive a 4x4 vehicle up the mountain to do inspection and maintenance, right? So, you know, picture goats, and then we build a road up it, and then we build a transmission tower, right? Because of the specification, we're only going to build a road for a 4x4 vehicle. It doesn't get a cement mixer. It doesn't get a crane. It doesn't get a front end loader. It doesn't get the articulated lorry with the steel up it without them falling off occasionally. So we had them falling off, but everybody shrugged their shoulders and what can you do? So when we talked to the client and said, your specification doesn't create an environment for our success, I then have the construction people saying, yeah, it would be great if we brought in Caterpillar and Leap Higher and said, you know, what's the turning radius and the slope? And again, technical things that I don't understand. But everybody with passion was able to say, if I get this, I'll be able to do my job well. So the client started communicating, instead of telling you, this is what I want, what do you need to be successful? And the first one on paper looked really expensive, but after they did it, it's actually cheaper. You know, at all levels of the organization, we realized that if I listen instead of tell, I'm going to find out that you need something that I can provide that's perfectly okay to provide. And if I listen to needs, and this is a Maslow now conversation, if I listen to needs, I can turn that into belonging,
Mm.
which gets you trust and dignity and respect in the journey anyway. And all
Yeah.
I'm doing is trying to work out how we can work together better,
Yeah.
right?
With that as well, it's also engaging with the people who are
Yeah.
doing the work or who are at the coalface, who know what those needs are to be able to do it, whatever it is, quicker, better, faster, smarter, whatever that end result is. But this has kind of proved that if you actually engage with people who know what is needed and get their understanding and provide them with the solutions. The end result speaks for itself with the profit, but then it's also, you've got that better buy-in from the individuals as well because they've had input. So they feel more invested to be able to go, yeah, like we actually want to build this project and we want to do it well. And they feel like they've got value then because they've been heard, they've been appreciated, and that their knowledge has been respected.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think a lot of organizations, when you talk at it, especially at a senior level,
Mm,
they'll say, yeah, the people know best at the front line, and the people know best at the people doing the job. They say, yeah, how do you tap into that knowledge? How do you operationalize that knowledge then?
mm,
You end up, having a very nice conversation, but then there's no depth to it. It's just, management BS sometimes, that kind of
mm,
thing. So what I found very powerful was storytelling, story listening and storytelling.
mm,
So, corporate communications where we won a project, we deliver it on time, we're profitable. It's nice, but it's kind of generic
mm,
and it doesn't really touch that, Hollywood story of the hero that overcomes the challenge and, makes the world a better place, right? There's no identifiable character in that
mm,
story. And we relate to characters who have challenges and overcome them. So what we started doing was telling those hero stories, like the guy that broke the status quo to cover up the hole
mm,
is actually a hero because his peer group would say, don't tell them anything. You tell them something, bad things will result.
mm,
But actually, covering up that hole, good things resulted. The
mm,
world became a different place because of that challenge. But also, we're now telling a story at a corporate level where employees don't add value, they're careless, they don't understand, right? They have accidents because, culturally or, they're not smart enough to overcome these accidents. So telling those stories about an employee being a solution changes the corporate narrative.
mm,
And now I'm going back to the business to say, I adapted my corporate procedures to identify what makes us strong and recognize that. How are you adopting your corporate procedures? Right? Because we're accountable to the employees for setting up that environment. So that storytelling piece helps change the dominant narratives of employees are careless and we know best, or
mm,
we need to tell you what it is that you need to do, right? Here's the procedure. I've given you a procedure. You should have read it, right? Telling the stories of people overcoming those challenges, of
mm,
solving the problems, again, at a managerial level, at a corporate level, right? Contracts have renegotiated with the client, and now our construction business can deliver against the specification, right? So the contracts group says, do you see what I did for the company?
yeah,
Right? And everybody says, contracts, thanks very much. I can actually drive my digger up the hill now. Thank you very much.
yeah,
So everybody adds value. Anybody
yeah.
that carries a paycheck home adds value.
This is something that's really missing in the industry. So you're definitely at the forefront with this and this approach as well, with this human-centric approach. Like a lot of people talk about it, and you see a lot of companies and they have their values and their mission statement and, all the things, I guess you could say. But to actually have the application and the consistency of enforcing it as well. So, like with the company that you spoke about, where people were actually thanked for actually highlighting the issues because it's like you're aligning with our values. What are you seeing with the work that you do? What can people do to help remove that disconnect with having some values and then actually applying it and enforcing it and making people accountable for it?
Yeah, I think leadership's really important. And when you're
Mm,
talking about values, leadership can't delegate the responsibility for the culture that exists in the organization, right?
mm,
So I think helping leaders understand, one, that they're part of the problem, but two, are also part of the solution is really
mm,
important. Otherwise, there's a disconnect. So, in my profession, we're very good at doing audits and inspections and tours and saying supervision and management really ought to close out these actions and do these activities. And you end up with that disconnect tick box. As long as you're doing the activities and closing the actions, we're okay. But there's not a real feel of a connection between board and frontline. And that's where the values really come in. I'll give you a little story. I sat with the board of one company, and the company was losing, $20 million a year. At a group level, it's like we fix this or we sell it. That's their decision. So they put a brand new CEO in, who's somebody that I'd been working alongside. He owned a couple of the problem children in the Middle East. But he was a really good strategist. He understood the industry, understood what it needed to do. And he said there's a disconnect between behavior and strategy, culture and strategy, if you like. And capacity is those two things in harmony, right? So culture doesn't eat strategy for breakfast. You need both in balance. So he had the strategy. He said, you show up and help me with the culture piece. And we started with a workshop that actually created the company that I founded, OrgTree. It's about how we connect. So see your organization as a connected tree, not a chart. So we sat down and I said, if you were to describe this company as a person in single words, how would you describe the behavior? And I got aggressive, transactional, cost-cutting, contractual, kind of finance, transactional sort of words, if you like. One gentleman did say, hang on a minute, we've got a better reputation than this. We're good at engineering and we're good at... And almost together, everybody kind of looked at him, paused. Somebody said, nah, and they went back to these negative words.
Yeah. Okay.
So I filled them up anyway. And I said, okay, can you tell me what your core values are? And somebody opened their laptop and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm looking up the core values. I said, you can't look up your core values, right? He said, well, marketing put them together. What's the purpose of core values? Well, we need to look nice to our clients. I said, okay, let me tell you what your core values are. And I pointed to all of the words that they'd given me. And they said, no, they're not. I said, okay, do your clients see you like these words, transactional, aggressive, cost cutting? Well, kind of, yeah. I said, let me tell you the story about an employee who bought a piece of equipment that you didn't give him so that he could fix part of the job that he was trying to do for our client. And when he tried to claim the piece of equipment back, did you follow the procedure? Did you get appropriate authorization? Is that transactional, aggressive, and cost cutting? Kind of, well, yeah. I said, so these are your core values because you've designed an HR compensation process around about being transactional and aggressive. Your contracts department has got terms and conditions so you can beat up clients after you get the job because you want to try and get more money out of them. But so these are your core values because it's how you've built your business and all your business processes. So if it was trust and it was dignity and it was courage and it was respect and it was excellence, how would that translate for HR, for finance, for safety, for procurement, for contracts, and so on and so forth? Once the board realized my reputation are these words, my departments operate in these words, the employee turnover, the accident rates, the client dissatisfaction comes from things that I am driving in this company. We started realizing that you've got skin in the game. How do you want to do this different? So great strategy. And that was really important. We needed a good strategy, but we had the heads in a place where they were willing to deliver it. So year one was a 750K loss. Year two, 350K profit. And we got rid of accidents in year two as well because they had some.
And so that was going from a $20 million loss.
Yeah, and a couple of years running $20 million. I didn't have any history beyond that, but I was told 2 years running $20 million loss, right? We're ready to give up and sell. So there you go. Capacity is culture plus strategy. You need them both in alignment and working.
So culture plus strategy. So how would you describe like that strategy looks like for companies?
So the strategy in that context would be, have we got the right clients? Are we operating in the right industry? What business streams are we in? So facilities management in hospitals versus, so they had a business strategy that made sense in terms of market share, in terms of skills and abilities. There's a little exercise that I run on social purpose. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, we kind of answer this the same sort of way.
Mm.
So if I give you a list of 20 professions, right? We'll pick electrician for obvious reasons.
Mm.
So electrician, engineer, plumber,
Yeah.
roofer, nurse, doctor, teacher, lawyer, investment banker, so on and so forth.
Yes.
If I then ask you, which of those professions do you admire most? Who would you put at the top of your list, do you think?
Generally, most people would put lawyer.
Oh, some cultural difference. That's interesting, right? Give me another couple.
Well, and then it'd be a doctor and a
Right.
nurse. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are certain cultural differences. So if you're in the US, military, police, fire
Mm.
brigade all feature very highly. If you're in Africa, military, police, they're pretty down the list, right?
Mm.
And you can probably see why. I think there's quite a litigious society in Australia, so I get the lawyer piece there, right? But what we tend to do is we look at professions and say, if you selflessly help the tribe and the tribe's purpose, get fed, safe and healthy, all that kind of stuff. If
Mm.
I observe you selflessly helping, dedicating your life, finding a purpose that helps society, then I admire you more than I think the people who I perceive to selfishly take from society.
Mm.
So we tend to think of investment bankers, Wall Street, that kind
Mm.
of thing,
Mm.
differently from doctors, nurses, educators, and engineers.
Mm.
So if you sit in a company, and this is the vision values piece, what is your social purpose? So a mining company that I worked with, their purpose was to be the best producer of nickel. I said, okay, how does that inspire your organization? Be the
Mm.
best. They had lots of competitive behaviors, actually. Interesting, be the best.
Okay.
And I said, well, if you were to have a social purpose, what would that be? And they ended up with, a lot of their metal goes into batteries, and
Mm.
batteries are helping with the transition to green energy.
Mm.
So they said, our product helps with the transition to green energy, and we invest back in our local community in terms of education and so on and so forth. Now, when you sit around the dinner table with your family,
Mm.
you've got a different story to tell them,
Yes.
and it's one a bit more about social contribution.
Mm.
So I think I didn't answer your question particularly well, but if you sit at the top of the company, okay, market share and da 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 da, but what is it that you're giving to society that will
Mm.
motivate your employees, and how do they feel that that contribution lines up with that purpose?
Mm.
And when you get HR and finance and procurement understanding their connection with I help you and together we do this,
Mm.
that needs to form the cultural strategy, which is I see you and your contribution, right? I hear you, I adapt so that we can work together.
Mm.
Whilst you've got that core, we actually need to have a business running. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Does that answer your question? I went off
Yeah,
piece there.
it does, but it's actually shifting the narrative to be one that's, like you said, that's transactional, contractual, financial, all of those sorts of motives, I guess you can say, which is
Yeah,
traditional business practice, to actually finding the bigger purpose.
yeah.
There's a story I remember, like when they were putting a man on the moon in the US,
Hmm.
and the president, was it Roosevelt or something, who went through NASA
Anyway,
and spoke to the janitor and said, well, what do you do here? "Oh, I'm working to help put a man on the moon." And
yeah,
he was the janitor, but he was part of that bigger vision for society, that his job
yeah.
was as important because his job was still part of helping to put a man on the moon. So,
There's a few stories. The St. Paul's Cathedral story that's very similar, when talking to the stonemasons and things like that. There's a great video that I saw many years ago, it just popped into my head there. It's set in a school in India. Each of the pupils has to tell, a story about what their mum or dad does at work.
mm,
This child said, my dad has the most important job in the city. I said, oh, is he the mayor? No, 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 no. Is he a chief of police? No, no, no. Does he head the fire brigade? No, 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 no. Is he the head of education? No, 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 no. So they go through all of these, what would traditionally be considered as important jobs.
yeah, yeah.
And then it cuts to a guy in the sewers, making
Ah,
sure that everything flows,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
My
yeah.
dad doesn't do that, the city stops.
Yeah.
It was actually a charity. I think it was a charity video trying to understand, the poverty and things like that people do. It's a surprise, right? You don't expect to see that. Like we said earlier on, the janitor, everybody, anybody that gets paid adds value to the organization,
Yeah.
contributes to the organization, is necessary.
Yeah.
And dignity and respect and trust is seeing that value. And I think a lot of the success that I've had is that changing the narratives, changing the
Mm.
stories, telling the stories of people that are trying hard to contribute, but the organization has put challenges in their way.
Mm.
This is how we overcome the challenges.
Yes.
And where we start adapting as an organization to enable you to, I didn't realize I put that challenge in your way. Let me take it away. Let me
Mm.
take that away. It
Yeah.
starts switching the accountability.
Yes.
Instead of being accountable upwards to your boss for, a goals conversation that you had a year ago,
Mm.
we're accountable to the employees for the services that we provide that enable them to be successful.
Yeah.
But it's an intrinsic accountability rather than I've written something down. I think that's important as well. You need to feel that your contribution in setting other people up for success that connects with purpose
Yes.
has meaning to me. And then the discretionary effort of the joiner, of the
The
janitor,
janitor.
right?
Yes.
The janitor, right? You've got that intrinsic motivation because I'm part of something that's bigger than
That's
me, and I'm very
bigger.
proud of that.
Mm.
And a lot of companies chase discretionary effort, but they don't know what that means.
Mm.
I've gone around organizations and said, who would do a favor for you if you asked?
Mm.
It's not a job, it's not a task, it's not part of your job description. Who would do you a favor?
Mm.
If you go out your way to help somebody on something that's not your job,
Mm.
then you've got a relationship that's founded in trust and respect because
Correct.
I'm willing to go further for you. So that janitor every day is like, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to do
Mm.
you a favor
Yeah.
because I'm so fired up and proud because I can guarantee you that there's a lot of intrinsicness about that janitor.
Yes. Well, and he understands the big picture and how it's contributing to society as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and putting the man on the moon, they said, was about inspiring a country because of
Correct.
a success, because of an achievement, because
Yeah.
of that unseen. It's
Mm.
inspirational.
Yeah.
And the American president isn't sitting down saying, pay your taxes.
No.
We're putting more money into this, we're putting more money into that. It's like, we're a wonderful country. Look what we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. So you touched on before about your company Tree and how you're
Mm.
helping companies understanding all these aspects, the gaps that they've got, the collaboration, the values, the respect, the trust for the people, empowering, all that sort of stuff. You mentioned before about it was something that led you to starting Tree, and just curious to hear a little bit more about that story and what you do as well.
Mm. It's a journey of just 2 years, right? That consultancy piece. But when I look back, I've been a consultant forever.
Yeah.
So, if you can imagine sitting in a corporate office with, multiple projects, different companies out there, I've got a choice. I can sit and write policy and issue memos and things like that from the ivory tower, as some people would call it. But what I found really, going out and sitting on projects and listening to people, how they felt, where they were helped, where they were hindered, where they had
Mm.
challenges, and so on and so forth. And again, I'm technically incompetent. A lot of safety people have a reputation of going out with a clipboard from the office and saying, here's my agenda. You should be
Mm.
a little bit better at doing the following things.
Mm.
But we haven't listened to the site, right? The people working there to understand their challenges. And because I'm technically incompetent, I'm standing in an oil refinery, I'm in a pharmaceutical plant, I'm standing at the side of a river looking at a bridge, whatever. I had no idea what's going on, right?
Mm.
I think that weakness you can turn into a strength, right?
Yeah.
So, what's it like to be you here?
Mm.
And somebody tells you a story, and there's very few people doing that. So, I can go back to the office and say, these people are really struggling because we're not listening,
Mm.
right? We're doing things that we think are adding value, but we're not listening. So, that got me to fixing relationships between head office and site, and on site fixing relationships with each other. So I started going around and realizing that, my time is limited. I'm going to turn up here. The problem is that you're not talking to each other. here's something that we can work on together. I'll check back in a couple of weeks kind of thing. But when I come back, they're starting to find and fix their own problems once they see that each other's helpful and valuable and contributing. So somebody asked me to speak at a conference, 2018, I think it was. I got asked to speak at a conference. You know, my ego said yes before my practical mind realized that there was a responsibility to actually deliver something right, to the audience. So my first conference was in Malaysia, and I stood up in front of 1,000 people.
Wow.
And I was terrified. I was terrified.
Yeah.
I told them, I'm going to give you a case study. I'm going to tell you what I did to practically do something. And I'm going to tell you what changed as a result of that and how I know that it had changed. And it seemed to work. And I got invited back, and then I got a keynote, then another conference organization picked me up. And it's only at this point that I realized maybe I've got something to say.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, maybe somebody's interested in the fact that I took a group of 30 companies killing 5 to 15 people a year to zero in 2 years and put profit in the bottom line. Apparently, that's a story that people want to hear, right?
Yeah, it is.
So a consultancy picked me up and said, you know, we're largely a training company. We want to be a consultant. How do we do that? And I started with, well, if you adjust your business processes like that, if you understand purpose like this, if you understand how to listen, if you change this bit here, which is more, I'm going to help you in your context, fix the problems that you have, but I'm going to make it sure that it's systemic and you've got the strategy and culture together. But instead of asking for training, they said, you know, we've got $20,000 with you on training. I turned that to $150,000 and $250,000 worth of work. But that's what the client valued, right? That's what they actually want. You know, there's a lot of companies out there that will do training, and it's that, you know, creating awareness of a problem, thinking that you've solved it, or management saying, well, we put people on a training course. What I was actually offering is, here at the board, think like this and listen like that. Here at the workforce, use that to adapt and listen instead of. And then communications, here's the stories of the struggle that we're overcoming and who's helping. And started just connecting the organization together. That company that I worked with, they actually went bust 2 years ago. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go myself.
Yeah.
At which point you find out that sales and marketing and flyers and, you know, business stuff isn't just about having a good idea.
Yes.
It's kind of hard.
Yes.
But yeah, so did that answer your question?
It did. And org tree, like you touched on it before about how you came up with that name.
So when I went to talk to people and said, how does the organization work? They showed me a chart, right? Here's the org chart. And there's something inorganic about that. There's something, you know, we don't like being put in boxes, and it doesn't reflect the way that we work. It puts us by definition into silos, right? And I understand the structure, and you know, if I need to talk to somebody in HR, then I look at the org chart to find out who that is. But I wanted something that, how do I reflect how it is that we work together? And I said, it's a tree. So if you picture a tree, you can see the root system. What's the roots of our behavior? So if I go back to that example that I talked about earlier on, when I said to the company, tell me how you behave, right? Describe that. And I got transactional and aggressive. That's at the roots of this organization. The roots are fed by those words. The roots are fed by those intentions. And it goes up through the boughs, through the branches. And when I pick a piece of fruit off the tree that's supposed to taste like social purpose, it actually, if I ask the client to describe you, when they bite that fruit, when we deliver fruit to them, it's transactional and aggressive, which is exactly the roots that we fed the organization. So if I was to put trust in there, if I was to put respect in there, right, then the services that connects us all, and by the way, the fruit, the leaves, the branches, the twigs, everything, they're all connected.
Yes.
We're all trying to deliver fruitful relationships to deliver fruitful purpose, right? And, you know, you can mess about with it. You can color code it. If I put finance in there as a great big influence and color code where that reaches in the organ or HR or whatever, you start to visualize the influences that we have with words and purpose, and, you know, if one part is overly dominant from another kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't see us as an org chart. I see us as a connected org tree.
Yeah. I love that. Awesome. And it's so true because we are all connected because you can't deliver an outcome without everyone being on the same page. To me, I liken it to a football team. Like we're all on a football team. We just all play different positions, but we've all got the same goal, which is to get the football up to the other end and through the goalposts.
Very true. And behind the scenes, you've got the coaches, you've got the physiotherapists, you've got the
Correct.
dietitians, you've got the manager, you've got the defense coach, you've got the offense coach, you've got the people that teach you how to do a free
Yeah.
kick.
Yeah.
You've got, people that produce the flyers. You've got somebody that's selling tickets,
Yeah.
right? If you didn't have somebody on the turnstiles letting people in you've got no
Correct.
supporters, right? The whole organization needs to understand how it fits together, right? I'm a Formula One fan. It's really interesting. There's a couple of YouTube videos about Toto Wolff,
Okay.
and
Yes.
he said his journey with Mercedes, he showed up and he walked into the reception of Mercedes. He's not the leader of the business. And he said there's out-of-date magazines on the reception desk. There's, out-of-date posters. There was lots of bits that said to him, we're not a professional organization in every aspect.
Mm.
And people are motivated to innovative, creative,
Mm.
discretionary effort, do favors, right?
Mm.
Not my job to make sure the magazines are in date. So he sat in that organization and said, every part adds value. And if one part isn't working, that's on me. That's on me. This is a leadership issue because I didn't set you up for success. Right. So
Mm.
I'm sitting watching this guy going, one, I'm a Mercedes-Benz fan. Well, I'm going to be a Ferrari fan because Lewis Hamilton's now 44 Ferrari, right? But anyway, I'm looking at this guy who leads the team who won unprecedented, back-to-back world championships. How did you achieve that?
Yeah.
Because I made everybody's contribution valuable, and
Yeah.
everybody's contribution is valuable. And by the way, if it doesn't work out, it's not your fault because I didn't
Mm.
set you up for success. Let's figure
Mm.
out how I can learn how to give you what you need to be successful. They went with a new concept. It didn't work out. Mercedes showed up with a car that wasn't working, and they put a technical guy. They'd promoted him and put him in a position to be like engineering director or something like that over everything. And they said, you know what? We give you a job that it's on us, right?
Mm.
But that isn't the job for you. So they promoted him and put him in another role and brought a different guy in. You look at Alpine, I'm sorry for the Formula One references. You look at Alpine, they keep firing the manager and they keep firing people. There's no stability in the team, there's no structure, there's no organizing. There's like, if you don't perform, you're fired, right?
Mm.
So that's fear. Whereas Mercedes-Benz are like, if you don't perform, that's our fault. How can we learn from that? You see high trust organizations, high trust countries
Mm.
outperform low trust countries, low trust
Mm.
organizations.
For me, like to kind of summarize that, that would be like leaders actually taking accountability and responsibility for what's happening as the collective, rather than actually pushing the blame elsewhere that it's the people's fault, but them actually taking that responsibility and saying, hey, I'm accountable for this because that's my fault. I didn't set you up for success.
I completely agree. And I've got a little story on that, funnily enough.
Because you love
Um,
stories.
because I
We love
love
hearing them.
stories. Yeah, but our brains are programmed for stories, right? Because
Absolutely.
before
That's how
we
you
wrote,
learn.
yeah, we used to sit around the campfire, and the lore, LORE, was passed down through stories. This is an acceptable behavior in the tribe. And
Mm.
by the way, we're here to make sure the tribe was fed and safe and successful. And that's what the stories were all about.
Mm.
And then we translated it into LAW and started employing lawyers and safety people. Not quite the intention, but lore was stories. Back to your point, it needs to feel like that for leaders. They need to understand the implications and the impact of their decisions. Because if you don't feel it and you haven't experienced it, then it becomes one of those, yeah, kind of thing. So I was invited to site. I thought I was going for a site tour and one of our construction sites in the power industry. And it turns out they'd run a week-long safety campaign. Now, in the Middle East, you don't take time off from work.
Mm.
You work.
Mm.
So us taking time out in the working day to run a safety campaign was something that just didn't happen.
Didn't
Right?
happen.
It just
Mm.
didn't happen. So we've already broken with tradition. We've already got permissions from senior people to do things that wouldn't normally be done, right? So
Mm.
so when I walked through the door, expecting to do a tour, and they've got 800 people sitting down in this room that we've constructed to show me what it is that they've done. And we're immensely proud.
Yeah.
And, I was quite emotional. They said, right, Andy, showed us what it is that they've done. They said, right, Andy, speech. I can talk, but I do like to, I do like to be a bit prepared.
Yes.
And I had nothing. I had nothing because I was feeling, geez, what's going on here? So anyway, I said, look, I'm going to give you my definition of leadership. And I'm cheating because this is actually Paul O'Neill, but we'll come back to that if you want. But I said, if you do not have what you need to do your job, there is nobody in this organization to blame but me. Because if you haven't got what you need, and it isn't okay to ask, which, by the way, is at the root of most accidents I've ever investigated. I don't have what I need, and it wasn't okay to ask. If you don't have what you need, and it isn't okay to ask, then I haven't set this company up to set you up for success. So put me to the test. Who doesn't have what they need to do their job? And there was a gentleman from Nepal stood up and said, I need a shovel. Right, my shovel is worn out. If you can picture like a shovel with a point on, not the flat edge shovel, he'd like worn a crescent moon in the side of his shovel. I've got a photograph of it.
Wow.
He'd worn a crescent moon. He'd worn it out. He said, I need a new shovel. One of my guys stepped forward and said, you know it's okay to speak up. And I said, apparently not. And that's a leadership conversation that we're going to have, you and I. And I turned around because the management team were behind me and said, can we get this guy a shovel? And the finance guy said he can have two tomorrow with a smile on his face. And I said, it's interesting that finance said that and not operations. We can have a talk about that tomorrow. So I said, there you go, you can have two tomorrow. Now, this guy from Nepal walked through the 850 people sitting there and gave me a hug.
Oh, wow.
He gave me a hug. I carry a job title and qualifications and experience. I work for the owner of the company. I'm Western, I've got a white face. That social interaction doesn't happen, right? But the conversation the following day with the management team, because I got them together, I want to talk about this. It's not about, let's dig into corporate culture, he said, with a pun intended. So that guy didn't ask for a new shovel, despite it being worn out, because it's not okay to spend company money. Because actually, if you've damaged a piece of equipment, it comes out of your salary to pay for it. And that guy sends all his wages home. Nepal's a very poor country. It still hasn't recovered from the earthquake it went through years ago. So this guy sends all his money home. He can't afford a new shovel. We can. In fact, we can afford two tomorrow, said the finance guy. So what's the implications of the financial policies, financial decisions that sit with this table on the culture of this organization? And I'd tell you something, that guy that's going to dig holes tomorrow, he's going to dig better holes than he's ever dug in his entire life.
Yeah.
That conversation with the board about dignity, respect, and trust as opposed to aggressive, contractual, and so on. If you don't feel it as a leader, you're not going to do something about it. If you don't see the connection between my decision and the front line, you're not going to do something about it. And, I've been fortunate with the roles that I've had with companies to sit at board level. I need you to understand the implications of our decisions here on how this company is run. And if you can't see the link, it's because we haven't worked hard enough to understand it. We haven't listened.
If there was like 3 quick tips that you could say, these are some low-hanging fruit that leaders can do to help make a difference without any big strategies, policies, whatever it is, what would be 3 quick things that leaders could do to help address that low-hanging fruit to start shifting the dial?
I can change, if I can change how you think, I can change how you behave. And there's a few social experiments that I help leaders do that are very humanistic in their approach, but get them to talk to people that they wouldn't normally do. It's part of my 5 steps to psychological safety, because a lot of people say in an environment of trust and psychological safety, this is what it looks like. And when you haven't got it, this is what it looks like, but very few help you with the bridge, right? How do I go from there to there? So one of the first things, and it's a lovely little thing, as a leader, it's a random act of kindness. It's gratitude. I want you to leave your office and go to a department that you wouldn't normally talk to, a part of the business you wouldn't normally be in, and find somebody and say thank you just for doing their job. Not above and beyond, not, we don't want competitive behaviors. We want it to be okay for you to be you and do what you do. So just go out and say thank you, but take a selfie and write a paragraph, and we'll post it on our social media site. About 6 months ago, I got a photograph on LinkedIn that somebody took with me 5 years ago to say, hey, Andy, I found this. Do you remember when you said thank you to me?
Yeah, wow.
That 5 minutes lasts an awful long time.
Yeah.
And you saying thank you makes you feel good. And it makes that person feel good. But anybody that witnesses it feels good also. Reading the story makes you feel good. But it humanizes people as well.
Yeah.
It's easy, to say thank you just for being you. Keep it going, get other people to do it. So you can run little campaigns, as I've done as well, round about it. To be more strategic, you can connect it with observation programs or whatever as well. The next thing I would suggest is, as a leader, say to your team, I want you to go to a different department and ask them, have you got a problem that I can help you with? Because that means that you need to ask, well, you don't know what's coming back. You're out of control. There's social risk involved. But people are going to ask you for help based on your relationship. So there's not that much at risk. But what it does is it starts that very human process of being helpful. And instead of you pushing your agenda, you're actually listening to mine and you're being helpful. And that changes relationships. And again, go back. And when you go back to the leader, you need to be able to tell a story. Tell me how you were helpful. Tell me how you were helpful. And if the leader doesn't like the story, or you haven't gone far enough, or you didn't do something about it, you ought to feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But what we're doing, again, somebody you don't normally work alongside, a different department, what you're doing is starting to break down the silos and the barriers in a helpful and constructive way, in a listening sort of way. Back to storytelling. If the leader sucks up some of these helpful stories and then goes to the communication team or however it is you want to do it, and then start telling individual stories about being helpful in the context of your company core values, in the context of purpose, then you've got a character, an identifiable behavior, and ultimately a sense of you belong here if you exhibit this kind of behavior. So whatever your values are, trust, respect, dignity, whatever, if you can soak up some of those stories as a leader, and then with your name attached to it, say, I want to express my gratitude to the following individuals for the following kind of stories in the context of vision, values, and so on, then you've got especially if there's a challenge to overcome or whatever, you've got a mini hero story there. So
love it. Thank you so much. So just to round it all out, a closing statement, comment, just something to round out everything that we've covered off on, because you've said so much, which is so valuable and really appreciate it. But what would you say is a bit of a closing out for anyone that's listening?
So every piece of knowledge already exists in your organization, and everything that you need to know already exists in the collective works that are out there, because I've invented nothing new. I've just relentlessly researched and then stolen things and then used them and applied it. I'll close out with Paul O'Neill because I mentioned him earlier on. He used to be the CEO of Alcoa, and he quintupled the turnover of the organization whilst eradicating accidents, and said at the first shareholder meeting, I'm going to talk about safety, right, as the new CEO, right? So a lot of people went sell, 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 not buy, buy, buy.
Yeah.
So he said, I've got 3 things. 1, are you treated with dignity and respect in every interaction you have with everyone every day? 2, are you given what you need to contribute to this organization in a way that adds meaning to your life? And 3, are you recognized for that contribution by somebody important to you? Everything that I've talked about revolves around those 3 things.
Yes.
But in adapting corporate processes to deliver that.
Yeah.
I love it. Such valuable information. Thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate your time and the wisdom that you've shared with us.
As long as it's helpful, I'm happy.
It is,
You're very welcome.
absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope this conversation gave you something that you can take with you, whether it be a little bit of insight, inspiration, or maybe just a reminder that you're not alone. If it resonated with you, please share, because we're better when we help build each other up. And remember that your experience, your story, and your journey, it all matters more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and never forget, you are epic.